U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan drew heavy criticism from China, which also saw that country take part in military drills soon after she touched down.
So joining us live with more on the trip and the implications is the Washington Post foreign affairs columnist Ishan Tharoor. Ishan, thanks for joining us this afternoon. So China and Russia lining up, calling it provocative, and it is the first time in 25 years an American official has visited Taiwan. I think it's fair to say that the country's called a provocation. It is provocative, but really, how provocative is it?
Oh, just to clarify, it's the first time in a quarter century that someone of the speaker's stature has visited Taiwan. You have quite a few other American politicians going through Taiwan these days. It is, it can be interpreted absolutely as a major provocation given the formal U.S. policy on the issue, which is that the U.S. does recognize the one China in Beijing and only has informal ties with Taiwan. But the facts on the ground, the reality of the situation right now is that we're in a moment where there is profound confrontation and competition with China and Taiwan is increasingly a major bipartisan issue here in Washington, where you have both Republicans and Democrats eager to embrace the government in Taiwan, eager to celebrate, as Nancy Pelosi did, Taiwan's democracy, and keen on sort of planting a flag there in a certain way, as we see this sort of long-running tension and competition with China play out.
Right. And Ishan, we know that Beijing had repeatedly warned of dire consequences, even using words to U.S. President Joe Biden, like those who played with fire will perish by it. We saw them do their military drills after she touched down, and after she left, those drills continued. So are there any real consequences, you think, to her visit?
We're going to have to gauge this. I know this is a very boring answer, but we'll see in the weeks to come. What we saw from China in the last few days has been quite striking in the scale of their response, the nature of these military exercises they're conducting, the economic measures they've taken on Taiwan. It's been quite angry, and it does suggest, because of course Chinese President Xi Jinping has long said that his view is that there will be unification with Taiwan. It does suggest that for Beijing, this, the U.S. has given them a reason to ratchet things up a bit. And so in the weeks to come, the months to come, we may see a different kind of Chinese alignment strategically around Taiwan, and that's going to raise the costs and raise the risks of further escalation.
Ishan, why would Pelosi make this trip now?
Well, that's a big question here in Washington and a big source of debate. She has very clearly staked her own kind of personal legacy on embracing the Taiwanese cause. She's been a long-standing critic of China, of the Communist Party government in China, and of its squelching of democratic aspirations of the Chinese people. So for her, and she is a venerable politician at this point, this is a way of showing her own kind of investment and stake in this issue. But the Biden administration very quietly has said, we really wish you had not gone at this point in time.
Right.
This is a bit awkward for us. But there's a plausible deniability between the legislature and the executive here in Washington, although the Chinese don't see it that way.
Right. No, it's very interesting indeed, because even the military was like, this is not a good idea for you to go. She went anyway, citing that, her solidarity with Taiwan, a democratic island, is very important. And she was also bestowed with the highest civilian honor there.
Yes, and many people are saying, why should we criticize this visit when the Taiwanese are quite happy with it? By and large, they really welcomed her. They appreciate U.S. lawmakers showing that Taiwan is not isolated on the world stage. And there are many also here in this country who say Taiwan is a country that should be celebrated, that should be embraced, that they stand for political values that matter. And Pelosi, again, reiterated that this is one of the front lines of the battle between democracy and autocracy, and that's the moral energy that she brought to the situation.
So when, Ishan, do you think we may see results, good or bad, from this visit, whether China follows through on any threats or whether, something specifically happens, from Taiwan's side here? I mean, is there sort of a timeline on that you think we could look to?
No, so this is a really symbolic visit. This is not, there's no deliverables that the U.S. gets out of this. And it doesn't change anything fundamentally about the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. What it does change is some of the calculations we're seeing over the Taiwan Strait, between China and Taiwan, between China and the U.S. The Chinese are moving the needle a bit in terms of the ways they are arraying their forces over Taiwan, and the rhetoric in China has intensified. So what we have to watch and what we're all going to be paying attention to in the time to come are scenarios where we may see the possibility of misunderstandings, miscalculations, and of course then the real threat of conflict between these two nuclear-powered superpowers.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw what happened in Hong Kong, shortly after the takeover or the handing back of Hong Kong to China and all the protests there. So fingers crossed it's not another situation that'll happen in Taiwan because of this visit. All right, Washington Post international columnist Ishan Tharoor, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.